the last variation in the Petrov, and this is a more solid choice from black. We saw in the previous example just how complex things can get if black goes a bit gung-ho as well. So what are we looking at here? Well, after the moves, e4, e5, and both those horses come out. Did he say horses? Knights. d4, our suggested way to spice it up. Black captures on e4. That seems to be the best move, otherwise black's just worse. And now we take on e5. This is our favorite capture. I'm balancing the pawn structure, making it more tactical, getting black out of his comfort zone. And the move now that black is going to play is d5. Everything else should be covered. Of course, in the last video we looked at bishop c5, but this is really sharp stuff. d5 is a more solid approach from black. Black just staking something in the center of the board. And, you know, there's a couple of ways you can play this. As we've discussed, taking on d6 is what we were doing in the other lines. But here it's not quite as effective because our queen is more passive. And in those lines where we took on d6 previously, our queen was able to get to f4. Here our queen's going to remain on d1. So we're not suggesting taking here in these positions. And of course, black doesn't have to take the knight. So if anything, black's getting developed quicker. Bishop d3 is the main move. And after knight c5, black is very solid. And knight bd2 is now one way you can play. And it's actually quite theoretical at the moment, this, because Fabiano's recently brought in a new idea for black based on queen d7. And it's very strange, theoretical. We're not going to go here. Our move is, again, we're looking for sharp lines which are sound, which don't necessarily follow the masses. And the line we're going for is a bit of a hero of mine and maybe a lot of yours who've got the Jabava London course. And that move is bishop e3. This is an old pet line of the main man himself, Jabava, and a move which may well surprise even booked up prepared opponents. Because again, indeed, you won't find this line in Lakbadawa's 2019 book, The Petrov Defense, or his earlier work, The Petrov Move by Move. So it's been missed out in some main publications, which I find a bit bizarre because it's a move which has been seen a lot. Now, black has a number of ideas against this. What's the point of putting the bishop here, you might be thinking, and what are we going to get in store in this kind of structure? I mean, again, I prefer showing the theory first and then summarizing at the end. So please do wait until the end of the video. I hope I'm not boring you that much for the summaries. But in short, it's this e-pawn, which we like. Having a pawn on e5 in all of these Petrov lines gives us some attacking momentum. That pawn can be used to, at some point, stop black having a natural square for a piece to defend his king when he castles, for example, like f6. The pawn can be used to support our pieces coming into f6, just cramping black, giving us space. And later on, our bishop can sit behind that pawn, attacking h7. And by putting the bishop here, we rule out these bishop c5 ideas. So we're aiming really for normal, quick, decent development in this position. So we want to sort of play knight bd2 next. We want to try to get rid of that knight there. That knight's blocking our bishop towards h7. So we want to get rid of that one. So something like knight bd2. And then we want to go like c3, just to support d4. And even queen c2 to try and budge that knight away. And very interestingly, in a lot of these lines, we castle queenside. So you can see probably why I've picked this variation. So just to go over those lines again, we're playing normal developing moves, but we're often aiming for queenside castling against if black plays solid ideas. So knight bd2, c3, because we want to get our queen out of the way. The queen goes to c2, looking at h7, castling queenside, and then we can use these guys. Or sometimes we even allow black to take on f3, and we take with the g pawn, because if we're castling queenside, we get the open g line. So it's an exciting and dynamic way to play, which might shock your opponent. Now, bishop e7 is the most solid choice, and I guess Grishchuk's played this, so we'll come as our main choice to this one at lastly. Let's go through the other moves first, and of course there's lots of natural developing moves here, and we're going to adjust our plan depending on what our opponent plays. Of course, we're not always going to be able to castle queenside. We're not always going to play those 4 moves unhindered. But if bishop e7, then we're going to do this kind of thing when black commits over there. But we'll come to that a bit later on. Now, I did say this stops bishop c5, but what if bishop c5 is played immediately? Well, our moves are aimed at putting that off, and it's got quite a bad recommendation, but it was recommended in another book by Swamp Neil Dupade, 2020 book, Playing the Petrov. God, there's lots of Petrov books out there now, aren't there? And I think we're quite happy to see this. We're gonna take that one off. Let's get rid of that one, because at least it nudges the knight away. And now our idea of doing this kind of thing, it's not so necessary because that knight's moved anyway. So I think a more dynamic solution, and again, we want to think where our undeveloped pieces are always going to be best placed and change it, reflecting what our opponent's changing as well. And knight bd2 kind of doesn't seem right now. It seems a little bit more passive. And we don't want to go bishop d3. I don't really want to lose that bishop. So knight c3 has to be correct. And here we're getting a little tempo to attack that pawn, which needs to be defended. Now, castles just doesn't work here. It's not a sound sacrifice, so you need to play c6. And here, an interesting idea. And the interesting idea is b4. Just to misplace that knight. Now that we're controlling e4, it can't come back there. So it needs to come to e6. And the reason we're doing this straight away is that e6 is a nice square for black's knight, don't get me wrong. But at least now the bishop can't get out to g4 first. The kind of thing that black would like to play, let's just say we play a stupid move. He would like to play bishop here, and that pawn on e5, we've mentioned it being a strength. It can easily be a weakness. And if we go along playing blindly, let's just put that knight there now at some point. I'll play a couple of moves, bad moves. You can see how black is now threatening that pawn, and that pawn can really become weak. And this is a nice setup for black. So we're using the initiative as we're always trying to do in this course. We're not playing slowly. We're playing on speed. And b4 is the way to go. Knight e6, and now just bishop d3. White simply is aiming to complete his development, and now that we've gone b4, we're not castling this way, right? So we're adapting. We just want to finish our development, so we're going to obviously castle this way, and normally just with a pawn in the center that's not protected by another pawn, you want to over defend that, so we want to put a rook on e1. And then this knight might not be greatly placed, so I would probably want to bring that towards the king side. Another way you can bring that knight in is queen d2, knight f4, because that knight is quite nice. So we're generally castling, rook behind a pawn, queen up to connect our rooks, move the knight on c3 towards black's king side, attack the king. And this bishop I always find is such a lovely attacker. We even might have a chance to play f4, f5 later on. So black, let's have a look at some more moves. Let's have a look at a5 here. Try and do something over there. Well, b5 is actually a good move. a5 is a nice idea, I think. And the point behind b5 is that it looks here like c5 is annoying for us because those pawns are suddenly becoming quite dangerous. But it's actually a bad move, c5. And if black can't play c5, well, then this a5 move makes no sense. You know, he castles, we're going to castle, we're going to do those plans we've mentioned already. But the problem with c5 is that we can actually play bishop f5. And again, this is just showing that, yeah, black has a nice knight, but he doesn't have a nice anything else. You know, it's like one good knight and you're going to pay for it for a while. I've had a couple of them. And this pawn here is very hard to defend. You have to push on, and the white knight just comes into e4. And we can clearly see that black has gone horribly wrong in this position. Black is just overextended in center. So let's go back here, and this looks quite a nice line, right? This idea of just going knight c3, b4, bishop d3, and playing very simple moves. And another thing we tried to do in this course, I know the videos are very long. You know, I didn't plan it to be. I planned the videos to be 10 hours, but then the more work we've done, it's just you can't make this course 10 hours to give it justice. And one thing we have tried to do, though, to counteract the length of the course, because I'm always in two minds about the perfect length of a course, you know. One thing we try to do to counteract that is at least give you very simple plans when we can. Meaning that if you get to a lot of these positions, your pieces should just flow in a normal and easy manner. Okay, so bishop e3, bishop c5, I don't think is too worrying. And therefore, what about c5? And this is another very ambitious move from black. And it was seen in the stem game in this position. Anderson, Ekborn, Brisley, 1853. Anderson, a very famous player, right? Was it the Immortal game he was famous for? It was one of those ones, the Evergreen, the Immortal, the Opera. That wasn't him. I know that was Morphy or Marshall. Good, I get that right. Oh no, what was it, Morphy or Marshall? Oh no, the Opera game. Which one of the? I think it was Morphy, right? The Opera game. I often get Morphy and Marshall confused. Both American brilliant attacking players. Anyway, here Anderson now rejected bishop d3, and this is another case where, you know, black's been a bit more direct in the center here. I mean, our plan we originally said at the start was against slow development, but if black's sort of trying to supercharge things, our slow development, we have to consider what our opponent's trying to do. And if we go knight bd2 here, well, he might take this one and go d4. We're probably all right here, but I prefer bishop d3 straight away, because we're also creating mini threats. And, you know, another thing we're trying to do is we're trying to develop and create mini threats. And our mini threat is to take that knight off when we have a very good position with a standard approach. Take the queen, knight coming to g5. So let's have a look. Well, bishop f5, we can demonstrate this plan. Bishop takes here. Pawn takes is just really bad. And if bishop takes, we go knight c3. Everything's coming with tempo. Yet again, we're very willing to give up a bishop to get tempo. Be happy to exchange your bishop to gain tempo. And the tempo here is, again, you know, black doesn't want to allow this move. But if black takes on f3, trying to win a piece with d4, well, we get there first. Queen takes b7, knight here, and now knight d5. And this is actually winning for white. We're threatening to take the rook, so you have to move the rook. And now after check, we have this very strong move threatening checkmate. And if rook b6, knight d5 comes, winning. So bishop d3 is an annoying move. And again, if black plays something like this, then we will take that knight. We will take that one, and our knight is coming to g5, right? Whatever happens. And this is good with all this pressure. So bishop f5, not great. What about pawn f5? Well, usually our response when we have a pawn on e5 and f5 is played is to capture en passant, because it keeps the lines open. This course is about open attacking play, open lines, open the position, open your bishops, open things up. And now the knight has to take this one, and here we go to castles with a pleasant lead in development. And we also have some positional ideas in mind. For example, bishop e7, c4. It looks maybe like it could be annoying. So our bishop doesn't really want to go to e2. But we have rook e1 first. And this is actually quite awkward for black. All of a sudden, this is really annoying. Our bishop's threatening to come to b6, win the queen. And bishop e7 runs into bishop c5. So you've got to play something like king f7. And then we have bishop c4. So this is one of the cases where look at white's development, look at white's king. Black can't just plod on with pawn moves. He needs to develop. So bishop e7 developing. And here c4 is a nice, actually changing to a bit of a positional plan. Those pawns could be annoying. So let's just try to cramp them. And now d4, normal move. And because black is behind in development, this is what we were saying throughout this course. We're trying to keep lines open because we have the development advantage. When you've got an open position, you want to use when you have development advantage, you want to open up lines because your pieces can play more. But your opponent, on the other hand, wants to close lines. So this is kind of correct. And now bishop g5. Let's say castles, knight d2, and we're going for light square control here. Like squares like this diagonal. And we'll put some more moves on the board, and now rook on the open file. And we're kind of thinking of going knight h4 in, queen e2, these kind of moves. I think this is definitely preferable for white. We can play stuff like a3, going for b4, h3 to stop something coming to g4, and black is sort of lacking counterplay. I mean, I know he's got this protected passed pawn, but you often get these positions, and the protected passed pawn is going to be good in an ending for black, and it's good if black can activate his pieces, but he can't at the moment. So this is it's okay for black. Don't get me wrong; it's not terrible, but I'd certainly rather be white here. And of course, in this position, you might want to experiment with some other moves rather than c4 here. But c4 I like because these pawns are quite strong. At least get something in the middle. Okay, so c5 is not terrible, but black has to be on guard. What about knight c6? Well, in some ways, I would say that this is a little bit too quick. Because, again, we're reacting against our opponent's moves. Black's plan is, again, clear now. It's going for bishop g4 and trying to win this pawn. And this is another case where we shouldn't be afraid to give up a bishop pair. And bishop b5 is it's the most active move in this particular case. Normally, this move doesn't work because black just plays c6. But now we have a point to this move. And we don't mind damaging the pawns over there, given a go. Let's say black continues with his plan. Well, I'm going to go h3, asking that bishop the question, because if it captures now, we have a very interesting moment, which happened in the game West Arena, Palio, Dortmund, 1973. And often in this variation, we don't take with the queen, we take with a pawn. And again, you might be thinking, I don't like the look of that, but it's a tempo gainer. Tempo gainers. And this is what more important than structure often is tempo. And after the knight moves, we can keep that tempo up. Knight c3, tempo gainer. And all of these moves are creating threats. And after a6, okay, we will take that knight. And now we'll play f4, and these double pawns are not bad. And remember, in these lines, we're castling queenside. So we're going queen f3, castles queenside, and because of that double pawns, we have the g file. And this is where you can see the e pawn being very dangerous, combined with the f pawn coming up the board. Black only has one line to attack on, and that's not scary on its own. It'd be scary like in a dragon opening or King's Indian if Black could get that diagonal as well, but he can't get that. So this knight c6, bishop b5 looks good. And after this, maybe Black therefore should drop back to h5. And here I would recommend now going just knight bd2, because we know we're not worried about this doubleation in the nation. Is that a word, doubleation? Of course it's not, Simon. And we'll finish our development. So knight takes d2, queen takes d2. Given a chance here, we're going queenside in this case. Remember, queenside is preferred. We're only not going to go queenside if we're kind of threatened a bit early, like with that move c5 that Black could try. And here we might even go g4. Why the hell not? You know. And if Black captures here, we have that same kind of thing where we're going to castle long, go f4, use the g file, and use this pawn mass as well. And this is, I think, very attractive variation for white. Okay, back we go. So after knight takes e4, pawn takes d5, we now play the move bishop e3, the Jabava line. And the idea is to put our knight on d2 quickly, but our bishop's nicely placed. And what about bishop g4 straight away? This kind of makes a lot of sense because Black's going for this pawn. Well, I think our general rule against the bishop coming here is to give it a little kick. Why do we give it a kick? Well, first of all, if Black takes it, we can take with our pawn, forcing that knight on e4 in the center away and opening the g file. If the bishop drops back, then we now have an opportunity to, at some point, I wouldn't do it here, but at some point play g4, which we didn't have unless we play h3. But at some point, g4, breaking the pin, gaining the tempo, could be very useful. And our normal follow-up here, as we just saw on that last line of going h3, is just knight bd2. And this is a pleasant advantage for white. The threat is it's basically to exchange on e4 again, exchange the queens and go knight g5, which could be very nice for us. If Black takes on d2, which we've seen, we're always taking with a queen. And this is the kind of thing, the kind of capture we've just seen, which again, Black might be thinking, great, he's, open up his king, but we want him to, because when we castle, when we go rook g1, when we go f4, these pawns are very useful. They're not weak. We've got good development, and Black's king is very shaky in this structure. Total compensation for our double pawns. Double pawns are not always bad. So I don't like knight d2. So let's put knight d7 on the board, and just bishop e2. I think is correct here. Calmly breaking the pin. And this is kind of renewing our mini threat of sometimes taking on this square. And we're very happy to give up this pawn. So we're always looking for sacrificial ideas. Now, what happens if Black does go for that pawn? Well, let's have a look. Queen takes. This is what we want. And now c6, because he can't really grab that pawn straight away because d5. But now we castle queenside, as we've seen so often. We're ready to move our knight. And we can even play c4. Let's remember, even though we castled over there, we can still have this c4 move, which we saw earlier, to blast the position open because we've got better development. And after bishop takes f3, what do you capture with here? Well, again, it might look very strange to some of you, but I like g takes. If we get f4 in, we're not going to be a pawn down, so maybe Black can capture this one. And there might be some long-term compensation with like f4, rook g1. But this is one case where I wanted to show you again something a little bit different, the c4 possibility. And this is becoming difficult for black's underdeveloped structure. If he goes knight takes c4, well, after this, we play rook e1. And again, this is the case where we don't mind the queen exchange because black's going to be completely lost. Look at that king. For example, this one, and the bishop's coming to b4 if black blocks, so the king has to move, and this is now leading to checkmate already. Very nice. The king has nowhere to go. So maybe black has to play d takes c4. And now we just come into the center and bishop d6. Now it's time to play f4. Knight here, and we can even just play king b1. We're giving up all our pawns, but after queen c2, we are threatening bishop c5, stopping black castling. We're also threatening bishop takes g7. We're 3 pawns down, but white's position is very good again. So we're always trying to find you ways to sacrifice soundly in this course, and this is one of them. Can black defend here? It's not easy to defend because of the king, right? I mean, this rook is coming. We've got the 2 open lines. Like we say, bishop g7 first threat, and the second threat is bishop c5. And we're going to start moving our bishop here. I mean, you know, if you're not sure, put it in the move trainer, check it out against the computer. If there's any lines you're like, you know, doubtful, I suggest you put them on the computer to double check for yourself, you know, just so you know, keep playing the lines until you're confident with them. So going back, bishop g4, h3, and then just knight d2 looks quite nice. And if black doesn't try to win that pawn after bishop e2, but instead plays bishop e7, well, there's another interesting idea here, and this happened in McIntyre Hessel Poor Tutter 2008. And we could exchange knights and go like knight d4 or something like that, but I like the move played here, e6. And again, I just wanted to show you another little sacrificial idea. And our main idea is to take on e4. This is our main idea in most of the lines. And like I just mentioned, you could do it this way, for example, here, because we have queen b5. But I like this little intermezzo idea of playing e6, because after captures, we now take here. And the point being, we have this big target. Black has to really defend, but bishop c4. And if black tries to defend again the weakness, well, we bring in another piece to the attack. And with our rook coming to the d file and this pawn being under so much pressure, it's bad news yet again for the player of the black pieces. Okay, so we'll go back now, and bishop g4 doesn't seem too scary. Bishop f5 is asking, again, before you just continue with your normal moves, you know, if you weren't paying attention here, you might go knight d2. But you have to look at what your opponent's playing and, you know, adapt. And obviously with the bishop here, well, I want to go knight d4, and I will play knight d4. Might as well. If that bishop now drops somewhere like d7, then I quite like knight to b3. And what have I achieved by doing this? Well, I'm allowing this f pawn to move to kick that knight away, and I'm taking control of c5, so black can't move a piece there. And after something like this, just to demonstrate the point, let's just put this f3 on the move on the board. And if this one, we've got g3, and if knight takes, the point now is bishop f2, and this will win a piece. So bishop f5, knight d4, moving the bishop back there seems stupid. So bishop g6 has more relevance. And now I still like knight to b3, because we still have this idea, f3, and we control c5. Now, a couple of moves here. Now c5, it seems like a good aggressive counterattack. But we can now get a developing move in with check, and we can castle. And now f3 is even stronger because there's no worries at all about the check here. And this knight is loose in these lines. Our main idea, which black can't easily stop, is f3, knight g5, f4, f5. That f pawn going up one square at a time. And if d4, we just come back to c1. And yeah, you might be thinking, well, I don't like move, this way I'm moving my pieces back. You can do this when you have a definite threat, and this definite threat black can now not do anything against. So it's a concrete reason why we're breaking the rules here. And you can break the rules if you have a concrete reason, and this is very concrete. Otherwise, you shouldn't really be bending the rules. So what about knight d7? Well, knight d7 has been played. The idea of trying to sacrifice with c6, but I don't really believe this line, and it's not enough. We're going to go knight d2. It's not enough compensation. Looks a bit odd. Now a5 has even been tried, but now we can get our plan into action. f3, just so we can show this again. a4, and now, well, I don't see the point of taking there, because that knight's going to have to lose the tempo moving. So let's move our knight. And after knight c5, f4. And this is, again, a beautiful setup. And this is one of our main ideas, that little triangle or things in the middle of the board. And our bishop, we don't need to rush f5. Let's get castle first, but this is a better position. And finally, bishop e7 might seem like a normal try that black can do. But again, f3 works well. And now knight g5 demonstrates this plan of ours. Well, in this case, I would say that f4, the knight comes back. So in actual fact, which is okay, but in actual fact, h4 is even stronger. The knight comes back here, and the point is h5, and we've got g4 coming, so bishop h5 check. This is just a little bit of calculation here. Bishop f2, yes, we move our king, but after g4, we've trapped that bishop in classical style. Black doesn't have enough compensation. So let's go back to this line. Bishop h4 is therefore a little bit of a better go, where after g3, black can sacrifice a piece. But with this move, it doesn't have enough compensation. Let's have a look a little bit more. Queen g5, and now we actually want to swap off pieces, because one of the only times we've got a slight bit of pressure against us. And I like queen d2. We give another pawn, but after queen e2, yeah, black has 3 pawns, but his pawns are not as good as our extra piece, and we're swapping the queens off with an advantage. So bishop e3 is quite a tricky little move to face, right? So we're now going to come on to bishop e7, a solid choice, and the choice of Grishchuk's. Black's just saying, before I decide on my setup, I'll get my king castled. And I would like to say that bishop e3 is quite rare that, such a position as this hasn't had that many practical examples. Like, other lines in the Petrov have seen thousands of times, but this line, there's not much of a base to work with, which means it's more exciting from our eyes of trying to find new ideas theoretically in the opening. And here, well, now we do go to knight d2, right? And we challenge the knight. We're quite happy to take this one, and we want to get our queen out. So let's say black now castles. And in this position, taking the knight is not best, because we normally want to take the knight when we can misplace the king when taking, and when our knight can come to g5 without being captured, so it can win there. But we can't do any of those things here. So it's not the right way to play. Now, bishop d3 certainly doesn't look stupid, but Richard and myself were more attracted to another possibility here, which is c3. We thought this was a more interesting idea. It increases our control over d4. Now, that could be useful when black plays his counter-attacking ideas c5 and d4. We're stopping that one. It also gives our queen a way out so we can castle. And it seems to be just a useful little move to play. Now, knight c6 the main move we'll come to, where black tries to start play against e5 immediately. Now, if c5 in this position, well, things have now changed. We can play bishop d3. I think this one now, because there's a little bit more dynamic here. So playing a bit slower. I want to get bishop. But actually, there's a nice little idea here. And this is when, again, you have to be aware of subtle changes in the position. And now, taking on e4 works. When a move ago, it didn't. And why does this now work? c5 is actually a really weak, a real weakness in black's position. So we can take on d8. We can go knight g5. And you should be able to see here, for a start, the knight can target c5. If the knight is ever taken, this is just the c5 is very loosening. For example, bishop f5, for example. And after bishop f5, we can go bishop c4. And when this knight does drop, castles, knight c6, bishop b5. And black probably has to take on e5. Let's give that one a hit. And now the difference is clear. We're going to win that pawn with the advantage of the two bishops. That pawn is a weakness. Now, in that last line, what about knight c6 trying to defend? Well, here again, this pawn is a weakness. And we can take that pawn, and it's a pretty safe pawn. So again, when the position changes, you've got to adapt. You know, you've got to adapt like the river that does around a bend. Now, if knight takes d2 in this position, well, it just helps us. We just go queen takes d2 here. That's what we want, accelerating our development. You know, if we get this for free, we're very happy. If bishop f5, well, we've seen how we can attack that square. How do we attack that square? It's running into knight d4. And now f3 is not as scary because the knight goes here. You could try knight b3 again, but black is much better developed now with a castling. And he might even be able to try something like f6, having a bit of fun here. So in this case, I would get rid of that knight immediately. And after bishop takes, just play bishop d3. Because black's wasting so many moves, and we're trying to get the f5 square for our knight. Now, this is also tempting black into playing this very greedy move, which would be extremely happy to see with our queen coming to g4. Black should not take that one. If he goes knight d7, well, our idea will be something along this line. And with castling queenside, we have a pleasant edge yet again. Our better pieces, control of the open file. So these lines working very nicely again. So on to knight c6, and this is where we see another point of c3, and that is queen c2. We're forcing the pace. And this is actually a novelty, believe it or not. This hasn't been played. I mean, Jabava's played, I think, c3, but he continued in this position with bishop d3. And the problem with this one is it allowed bishop c5. And after a capture on this square, the bishop is annoyingly attacked. So by playing queen c2, we are preparing just to get rid of that knight, bishop d3, full development, castles, and start our attack. So here I think black should now take on d2. If he plays bishop f5, which seems very obvious, well, of course, we need to break that line towards our queen with bishop d3. And after this move, black can't maintain his knight there. Hence, I like the c3 here. And when things get exchanged in the center, the reason, you know, again, we're picking this plan is we kind of like these structures because we have simple plans. We can just put our rook into the center of the board and try to use this pawn here as an annoying little jabber. We might even at some point better join it with another pawn as well. So maybe something like f6 is sensible to stop that. Okay, and we can take here, we can castle queenside. Now, I expect, as in some of these lines, you know, black's going to be able to get equality, close to equality. But the good thing is they're not boring equality lines. Which side would you take here? You've got to ask yourself the question. It's probably too late now. You've got the course. In all the lines we've given with correct play, we're always preferring the white side of the structures. We have faith in the white positions. We're picking a lot of these lines practically as well. But even if black is able to dodge the bullets, you know, me and Richard have said, well, we want to take these positions on as white. And opposite side castling, I love that because it's loads of fun to play. And here, I like playing sides who've got the easier plan. And one of my favorite plans is h4 and knight g5 in such positions. I've had this kind of plan in many openings, aiming for h7, and that is just one simple attacking plan here. We can play on the e-file if we want, but I would certainly be looking at black's king and starting ideas with h4 and aiming for checkmate. So yeah, I mean, theoretically probably even, but it's easier for white to play. What about bishop c5? Well, now we see the difference having the queen here, and we don't even need to take on this square. We can go knight takes e4, and after bishop takes e3, we can even play in this position f takes e3, bizarrely enough, because we're just going to win this pawn back. I mean, it looks a little bit ugly immediately, but you can't take here because this is actually a very safe pawn, bishop d3 coming. And the other thing that we've seen already as an idea is that if bishop f5, we just go bishop d3. So it's a safe pawn. So this queen c2 kind of stops this idea that does work against bishop d3, which is bishop c5. We're stopping that idea. This works for some little tactical reasons. So now black has to move that knight. So knight takes d2 is one of black's better options. And now queen takes d2. And now consistent with black's play is bishop g4, this pawn. And here we're going for our interesting idea of castling. We're not afraid to double our pawns. If we get a chance, we're going to go bishop d3. So let's say black takes here, and then after this position, we're ready to go f4. So black needs to take on e5. And this is another case we're going to go into an ending. Yeah, I think here we should take our pawn back because I feel it leads to an easier position for us. We're giving up that double pawn, but first of all, we're into sort of a late middle game ending. And the first thing I want to say is that two bishops, better pieces, more active rook. But the immediate danger black is under is getting this knight out. He wants to go to h4. So we have a very interesting move in h4 here. And this is one of the reasons this unplayed line attracted us, because we feel like black has a number of chances to go wrong in this position. And white has full compensation for one pawn with the bishops and the rook anyway. For example, if black takes this one with a bishop, just bishop e2, and we're winning a piece. If the knight, well, the knight can't move, but we're winning everything. If the knight takes on h4, then we're going to go for rook h5. And we certainly are going to take on h7 if the rook moves. For example, knight g6 here, and after rook d8, we want to get our bishop to d3. So let's go king c2. And we're going to go bishop d3 and bishop d4. And we're only one pawn down. And that looks very scary to black, right? Very scary. So black probably has to allow us to take the knight when he has two pawns. So materialistically he's up, but we have two bishops and a rook in an open position. And our bishops are fine, fine pieces here. So definitely white all the way here. Our bishops can come into the middle where they control loads of lovely diagonals. And yeah, I mean, I have to say, I certainly prefer white. So you can't really take this pawn, I feel, as black. Bishop f6 would be a better idea, giving black another way back in. And now rook f5 is, again, a very unique idea. The knight has to move. And now rook g1. And it's a really weird position. Again, lots of these things maybe could do with some practical tests at the highest level. But we have an immediate threat of taking on S6, and we actually have quite a bit of an attack here. We're also intending H5, H6. This bishop is very loose. We go H5, H6. You can't take it. And this is an ongoing initiative. Black probably has to play here, for example, now H5. And this is very hard to stop. Very hard for Black to stop. And even in this kind of end game position, not really an ending, a late middle game, Black has troubles, even though he's got the queens off the board. So to sum up, and this takes us to the end of the Petrov with knight to f6. And as you can see, in every variation, we're not allowing Black the chance to get his rather dull, deadly symmetrical and boring game. We are playing d4 and we're spicing it straight away. Knight takes the best, and now we're playing the equally, well, the very rare move, pawn takes e5, where Black has a number of solid options, but we can even play bishop e3 as we do here. And if he goes to the sharp options, that allows us these crazy ideas against c7. So very fun, wild positions to play, keeping us with the initiative. And the thing I particularly like about these lines is they're very natural to play. Just think of your pieces, quick development, bring them out. If you do that, then you should get some very positive results here.